Hi, this is Dave Turnbush, the broker owner of San Jacinto Properties in LaPorte, Texas, in the Houston area. Today, we're going to talk about buying a home, the process. So you think you're ready to buy a home? So we're going to go over the 5 steps that you need to do in order to make this a successful experience for yourself. All right, step one, loan pre-approval. Before you go start looking at houses or, you know, talking to your agent and setting up appointments and things like that, you really need to get pre-approved for a loan. Now, assuming you're not paying cash. If you're paying cash for a house, then you can skip step one because there's not going to be a loan. But most people, about over 90% of all transactions involve a loan or a mortgage. So you're going to need to speak to a mortgage company or your bank or your credit union, whoever is going to be providing your loan, your money for the transaction. And you probably want to talk to at least two, if not more. A lot of people get concerned, oh, well, they're going to be pulling my credit. It's going to change my credit score. Well, I mean, you should kind of know your credit score already. And if you're over a 650, you really don't have anything to worry about. But if you're like between 600 and 650, you may want to be, a little bit concerned about people, pulling your credit. If you're under a 600, you're going to have trouble getting a loan. There's very few people that will want to loan money to you at that rate with your score. But they don't just look at your credit score. There's a lot of things they're going to look at. They're going to look at your debt to income ratio. In other words, how much money do you have coming in every month versus how much money do you have going out every month? What are your debt obligations like on credit cards and car payments and electricity and phone, etc. So the only person that can help you with that is going to be a loan officer. Your real estate agent is not really trained or licensed to help you with that information. So you're going to talk to a loan officer. If you don't really have anybody or you want recommendations, and it's wise to go ahead and ask your real estate agent for some recommendations because they do this all the time. They know these people, and they know which mortgage loan officers are going to be better than others, which ones are more trustworthy, etc. So you can always ask for recommendations from your agent. You're under no obligation to use those people, though. You can use anybody you want. But you need to ask him, what kind of loans do you have? How much do I need to make to qualify for this much of a house, etc. All of those things they're going to go over with you. They will figure out, how much you qualify for, and they will give you what's called a pre-approval letter based on the information that they have discussed with you. That pre-approval letter can then be shared with your agent, and they can use that to help start your search. But until we know what you're pre-approved for, it doesn't make any sense to start looking at homes that you either don't qualify for or can't afford. All right, step two, the home search process. Once you send your pre-approval letter to your agent's going to ask you a few questions about, what it is you're looking for. Um, is it a townhome? Is it a house, um, condo, etc.? Are you looking for a specific school district or a zip code or a city? What price range are you looking in? Do you want a certain number of square footage? Do you want more than 2,000 or less than 1,500? So the more information that you can share with your agent about the things that you're really looking for, it will help them setting up the search so that we're looking at homes that you want to see. And we're not just randomly going to look at homes that you're not interested in. Now, sometimes I've had clients that gave me a long list of things that, oh, well, I got to have all of these. And their list was so precise and so detailed that there literally were no homes that matched that criteria. So you can't ask for too many things. There's just not going to be homes that meet all of those specifications. So you may want to come up with a list of must-haves. These 5 things I have to have or I'm not interested. And then another 5 things that, hey, it would be great if it had this, or it would be great if it had that. Something like a swimming pool, or do you want a 2-story or a 1-story house? Do you want a neighborhood that doesn't have an HOA and deed restrictions? Or do you want a neighborhood that does have an HOA and deed restrictions? All that information you need to share with your agent so that they can set you up in the MLS. The MLS is the multiple listing service. Here in our area, in Houston, it's HAR.com. That's the Houston Association of Realtors. This is where you'll find all the homes that are for sale. Now, I know a lot of people use things like Zillow or Redfin or other search engines. Um, but the most accurate for the area that you live in is your local MLS because it is updated, constantly. HAR updates there. It's like every 5 minutes. So you're going to have the most up-to-date and accurate information. Whereas other companies like Zillow, they're pulling their information from these other sources, and it may be outdated or and not have accurate information. So let your agent set you up on the multiple listing service in your area, and you will get notifications through your email or your cell phone text every time a new listing pops up that meets your criteria. And then you can kind of look it over. And once you do that, you're going to want to set up some appointments. So let's go to step 3. Um, you'll set up appointments. Well, let's go back to step 2. Sorry. Your agent's going to set up appointments with the ones that you really want to see. You may have come up with 20 homes that you were interested in, but then once your agent pulls up the information on them and gets the disclosures and all this other information, whether they're in a flood zone or not, the information that you don't really have access to, but your agent does. Your agent will send you that information, and then that list of 20 homes that you liked may be down to 10 now. Because you've already weeded them out through the information that you were able to acquire ahead of time. So your agent can then set up the appointments to go see these homes. I wouldn't recommend seeing more than 5 homes in a day because they start to blend in together and you can't remember which one's which. Plus, it's difficult to get appointments back to back to back. Not all agents answer their phone all the time. So most companies are going to use showing services like Showing Smart or Showing Time, and you can set everything up, but it doesn't always work that way. So it's difficult to get appointments in succession when you have too many to look at the same time. Once you find the one that you really like, you'll discuss with your agent, and they'll go over negotiating, which is step 3. So your agent's going to run a CMA on the property, which is a comparative market analysis. They're going to see what other homes in that same neighborhood are selling for recently, and then they're going to give you an idea of what the market value is. They're also going to look at the condition of that home that you're interested in. Is it better or worse or the same as the other homes that are selling in that neighborhood? The home next door may be the exact same floor plan and it just sold for 300,000, but it had all kinds of updates and additional things that were recently done, and the house you're looking at doesn't have those things. Well, if they're not this, if it doesn't have the same stuff, it's not going to be worth the same amount, and your agent will be versed on what the value of those things are, so they can help advise you on what to offer. Your agent will then prepare an offer on a contract. In Texas, we use the Texas Real Estate Commission or Texas Realtors forms, and they will make sure that they use the correct forms, and there will be some addenda that are required. For example, if the home was built prior to 1978, you have to have a lead-based paint addendum. If it's in a flood zone, there will be some flood addenda. If it's in a mud district, you'll have to have a mud addenda that came from the mud district. So there's lots of different things that could apply to this particular property and not others. So your agent will be knowledgeable of that and will make sure everything you need to make the offer is included. That's why you're working with them, and that's why they get paid. Once that offer is sent to the listing agent, the seller will either accept your offer or they'll just reject it and not respond to you. And that usually happens when you make an offer that's kind of insulting. If someone's listed their home for 300,000 and it's worth 300,000, and you come in and offer them 220, well, they're probably not even going to respond, because now, they know you're not serious. You're just fishing for, the best deal. Investors do this all the time, and it really ticks off the sellers, and they don't want to talk to them. So you can actually hurt your negotiating status if you come in and you make, an embarrassing offer that's not even in the ballpark. So your agent will advise you on what an acceptable offer would be. Of course, you can offer whatever you want, but just be careful not to send something in that's going to get you out of the game altogether, especially if you're competing with other buyers. If you're competing, you want to have the strongest offer, not the weakest offer. All right. The other thing, the seller could also just counter offer. They may see your offer, and then the listing agent will send an email back to your agent, and say, hey, we liked your offer, but we want this. And they may change the price. They may not want to pay your closing costs. They may not want to pay your agent. You never know how they're going to respond. But once they respond, your agent can then share that with you, and you come up with a new approach. You can either say, well, that's not what we want, or you can agree, or you can continue the negotiating process until you come to a meeting of the minds, and we have a contract that everybody can agree on, and then everybody signs it. All right, that brings us to step 4. Once we have a signed and executed contract, we go to the inspection and appraisal process. First, we're going to have inspections. Once everything's been delivered to the title company, the buyer's agent will then let the buyer know, hey, we need to go ahead and set up an inspection. Here are some inspection companies you can use, or you can find one on your own if you know somebody. But usually inspections are done within the first 3 or 4 days of the offer being accepted, and that's done during what's called the option period. The option period is usually 7 to 10 days long, and the buyer pays an option fee for the right to terminate during the option period. So when we get the inspection report, there may be 20 things on there that are wrong. Of the 20 things, maybe 3 are actual legitimate issues. There's going to be a lot of grandfathered code issues, especially with older homes. They're really not a big deal. But something serious like, hey, the air conditioner doesn't work at all. Well, that's a big deal, especially here in Texas. So that would be something we would need to renegotiate and send an amendment over to get repairs done as part of the deal. If the seller doesn't want to do the repairs, well, then the buyer then has the option to terminate. So that's where we have the option period and the option fee. The earnest money, as mentioned at the underneath the step 4, is like kind of like a deposit to hold the house while it's under contract, and that money belongs to the buyer and is held in escrow by the title company until we close. And the buyer gets that money back at closing. It's credited towards their closing costs. They don't really get it back. It's just less money that they need to bring to the closing. However, the earnest money is a deposit, and the buyer can lose the earnest money if they breach the contract. In other words, if the buyer backs out of the contract for no legitimate reason, and they didn't have a reason, or they did it after the option period, it's possible they could lose their earnest money and the seller keeps it. That's why it's such a big deal. Okay, so inspections are going to cost you somewhere between $450 and $700, depending on the size of the house. They could be a little bit more, depending on the size of the house and how much they're inspecting. Like if you have additional things like more than one building, also like swimming pools and things like that they have to inspect. Usually the inspector will get you the report within 24 hours. It'll be very detailed, 20 to 30 pages long, and we'll have photos attached with comments and arrows pointing to things. And your agent will be able to help you go through that and decipher what's in there. Usually the inspectors will be happy to talk to you as well if you call them. So you can make sure that, whether something is a big deal or not. But once we get past the inspections and we're going to move forward, then your lender will hire or put in an order for an appraiser to come out. A licensed appraiser is sent out to the house to then do an appraisal. And they're going to look at whether the property is worth what you're paying for it. And the reason for that is because since a bank or a mortgage company is the one actually buying the house because it's their money, they want to make sure that the home is worth what they're paying for it or what you are paying for it. And so the appraisal is important. If your agent and the listing agent have done their job in marketing the house properly and pricing it properly, and the contract is written based on the comps, then there should be no problem with the appraisal because we would already have it priced, to match up with what the appraisal would be. Every once in a while, though, an appraiser comes out and under appraises a property. They don't think it's worth what everybody else thinks. Now, sometimes the appraiser really is wrong, and you can get a second opinion, and sometimes they'll override that first appraisal. And sometimes, they're not. Sometimes they just think, well, the buyer and the seller and the agents are crazy. This house isn't worth anywhere near what they think it is. But the appraisal is a big deal because if the appraisal doesn't match what's on the contract, then the lender is not going to fund on it. They're only going to fund what it appraised for, not anymore. So at that point, we would have to either renegotiate the price, and if the seller's not willing to do that, then you'd have to terminate. Or if the buyer has the money, the buyer can come up with the difference out of their own pocket. In other words, overpay for the house. Now, I saw that happen during the COVID times when people are literally fighting over houses. But right now, as I'm making this video in 2025, that's not very common. Okay, so once we've moved on and the appraisal has come in and we're all good to go, that brings us to step 5, the closing. About a week to, somewhere between 4 to 7 days before the closing, your lender is going to give you what's called a clear to close. And that means all your paperwork is in, the appraisal's in, the survey, everything's been done, and you're ready to close. They've given you approved, you're fully approved for the loan. And so now all they need to do is get all the documents over to the title company so that the title company can set up the closing and bring you in and have you sign everything. Most of those documents have to be signed by hand and notarized. So you can't just do this through the internet with DocuSign or something. There are some you can do, but most of them have to be notarized. So we're going to set up a day and a time to close. Now, the contract's going to have a closing date on it, but that's a suggestion. You have to close on or before that date. So you can close on the closing date on the contract, or you can close before. Or if you're not going to make it, you could set up an amendment to extend the closing date, and your agent will know what to do there. But we'll set up a closing time, day and time at the title company. And it's rare that the buyer and the seller are ever there at the same time. Sometimes they're there, like the seller signs first and the buyer signs second, but you're not going to be in the same room signing at the same table. It's in my opinion, it's better for the buyer to sign first because their portion takes longer. It takes about an hour for the buyer to sign, and it only takes about 20 minutes for the seller to sign because there's no loan documents for them. So their stack is a lot smaller. And then if the buyer closes first, all the documents can be sent to the lender, and that speeds up the funding process. So when the seller finishes signing, you can have funding and everybody can get the keys and go on home. Another thing you're going to want to do, like a day or two before the closing, is schedule your final walkthrough. The final walkthrough is where your agent will, meet you at the house, and you're going to go through the house one more time to make sure that any repairs that were supposed to be done have been completed, and also to make sure there's no additional or new damage to the property since you last saw it. And that has happened before when people are moving out. They break a light fixture, or something hits the wall and puts a hole in it or something like that. So the final walkthrough is an important step to make sure that the home is ready for you to move in. So on closing day, you're going to want to make sure you arrive a little bit early. Make sure you have your driver's license or a government issued ID like a military ID, passport, but they really want a driver's license because your documents do have to be notarized, and you can't notarize them without an official government ID. Also, whatever your closing costs are going to be, that will be sent to you ahead of time on what's called the closing disclosure. Your lender will send that out a couple days in advance, usually 3 to 5 days, and then you will know exactly what your fees are going to be and how much you need to bring to the closing. So if you need to bring $10,000 to the closing, you can't just show up with $10,000 cash, and you can't bring a personal check. The money has to either be wired from your bank to the title company, or you have to bring a cashier's check. So most title companies want the money wired because there have been known cases of cashier's checks that were fraudulent. They really prefer the money to be wired, and they will get with you about that and give you the wiring instructions. You need to be very careful though to make sure that who you're talking to is the actual title company and the closer, and not someone pretending to be the title company and closer that's trying to just steal your money. So there are some scams out there to try to do that. So your agent will advise you on all this stuff. Again, you'll bring that stuff with you to the closing. You'll go into the room. The closer will have the documents. They'll go through each page with you. They'll explain to you what you're signing and what's on each thing. The bottom line is you have to sign everything or you don't get the house. So there's going to be a lot of papers. They're very long and lengthy. You can sit there and read them. It'll take you 5 hours if you want to do that. Or you can just sign it and move on, because you're going to have to sign it anyway. And your agent will be there to kind of, make sure there's nothing weird slipped in there that shouldn't be there. At that point, once you finish, it usually takes about 20 minutes to maybe an hour and a half for the funding to go through. And at that point, you're officially closed and funded, and you can get the keys to your house. So I hope this video was helpful for you and that you got something out of it. And good luck to you, and we will see you on the next video.